Whether it be Grandmaster Nightfalls, raids, or solo flawlessing dungeons, a strong build can be the difference between banging your head against the wall in frustration or finally getting that solo flawless emblem. And after using this exact build to finally tackle my solo flawless on the Ghosts of the Deep dungeon, I can confidently say this is the best build I have ever made, as it puts out both crazy damage and has ridiculous levels of survivability. And if you think I'm just saying that, I've included a whole section of the video testing it in various different DPS scenarios, so be sure to stick around for that. But as always, if you just want to plug and play, we'll have a Mobalytics link below. But without further ado, here's what we're rocking with. So today, we're going to be combining our prismatic Warlock kit with a weapon that will allow us to unravel targets and deal massive single target damage, that being Final Warning, and the exotic armor Getaway Artists, to create a build synergy that literally allows us to charge our Transcendence meter in a matter of seconds. But the true synergy of this build revolves around our abilities, aspects, fragments, and especially our artifact mods, as they will give us some of the best survivability and ability spam available in Destiny 2. Now first up, let's quickly cover our abilities. The jump is up to you. I personally prefer Burst Glide. We then want to take the Arcane Needle melee to apply the Unravel debuff to targets. For our class ability, we take Phoenix Dive, which will grant us Cure ×2 upon cast, and then we take the Storm Grenade, as it's the only grenade available on Prismatic Warlock that works with Getaway Artists. Then for our super, we take the Song of Flame super. Now Song of Flame puts out some fantastic damage. However, its true strength lies in the fact that it grants us 90% damage resistance and radiant, plus a host of other benefits to nearby teammates. You see, any nearby teammate is granted 30% damage resist and a massive boost to their ability regen. Guys, this super is like a mini Apotheosis Veil to your nearby teammates. Everyone nearby is also granted Scorching Rounds to both kinetic and solar weapons as an added bonus. Now this makes Song of Flame so versatile that you honestly never want to take it off if you're on Prismatic Warlock. But when we pair this with our first aspect, Feed the Void, this is where the build becomes virtually unkillable. Now Feed the Void states that defeating a target with any ability will grant us Devour. However, what makes Feed the Void so strong is that it is currently the only way in the game to access pre-nerf Devour, which grants us a full heal as opposed to only 100 HP and additional grenade energy, making it significantly more viable in endgame content, and having it on Prismatic makes for a ridiculously strong build. Now for our second aspect, we are going to be using Hellion. Activating your class ability summons a solar mortar that lobs flaming projectiles at targets, scorching them. This is a fantastic way to passively fill our light meter and often applies enough scorch to proc ignitions on higher health targets, which can stagger enemies and stun unstoppable champions, making it a great tool for dealing with groups of adds or tankier targets. We then pair this with our exotic armor of choice, Getaway Artists. Now its perk states that consuming your arc grenade grants Amplified and an Arc Soul. We also gain an additional 5% grenade energy for every burst of damage that the Arc Soul deals. And while Amplified, it also fires at an increased rate. So now we have two Light Attuned buddies that will autonomously charge our Light Transcendence meter, with the Arc buddy granting us grenade energy whenever it damages enemies. And since both of these buddies are considered ability final blows, this procs Devour, granting us full health and even more grenade energy while active. We also gain the Amplified buff on command, which can be refreshed whenever our Arc buddy scores rapid defeats. Now Amplified not only increases our movement and handling, but also grants us access to the Speed Booster buff after sprinting for 2.5 seconds. Now this of course increases our sprint speed, however a lot of people don't know it also grants us an additional 15% increase in damage resist to combatants, which is a huge benefit in any level of content. For reference, the chest resist mods only grant 15% damage resist to a specific damage type, whereas Speed Booster gives us 15% damage resist to all incoming damage. Please consider subscribing if you didn't know that. We can also slot on the Galvanic Armor Artifact mod, which grants us an additional 30% damage resist just for being amplified. Now our fragments will be vital to our Transcendence uptime and overall survivability. And speaking of survivability, our first fragment, Facet of Protection, is a vital piece of the build, as it grants 15% damage resist while near 3 or more combatants. And this effect is increased to approximately 37% damage resist while Transcendent, which you're going to find is virtually always. Next up, we want Facet of Dawn, which grants Radiant for powered melee hits, and Radiant to you and nearby allies size on powered melee final blows. Now Radiant will of course provide us with the 25% increase to weapon damage, but also grants us the ability to stun barrier champions, meaning we now can stun barriers and unstoppable champions with this build. Now thirdly, we want Facet of Balance. Rapidly defeating targets with light damage grants melee energy, and rapidly defeating targets with darkness damage grants grenade energy. This helps feed our abilities, allowing us to activate Feed the Void more often. You'll also notice we create a synergy between our light and darkness abilities, as our solar and arc buddies will now grant us melee energy, and our arcane needle melee final blows will in turn grant us grenade energy, causing them to feed each other constantly. Next, we want Facet of Sacrifice. While we have an arc, solar, or void buff, ability final blows will grant us bonus darkness transcendence energy. Since we will constantly have Devour, Amplified, and Radiant, we will be constantly proccing this fragment. We then pair this with our final fragment, Facet of Devotion, where defeating targets afflicted with stasis or strand debuffs grants bonus light transcendence energy, and this pairs perfectly with our exotic weapon of choice, Final Warning. Now if you've watched my videos before, you probably know how much I love Final Warning. This thing absolutely shreds through enemies thanks to its unique synergy of exotic perks. Its exotic trait, All at Once, states that holding down the trigger marks targets within range and loads multiple bullets, which fire in a burst with increased stability on trigger release. Hitting a marked target with a fully charged burst will unravel them, allowing us to take advantage of Facet of Devotion and create a tangle upon defeat. Meanwhile, its exotic trait, Take Your Poison, grants us an additional benefit against marked targets. When hip firing, projectiles will track marked targets, dealing increased body shot damage on impact. Now this increase in body shot damage is about 20%, which is nothing to sneeze at. However, when aiming, projectiles have greatly increased velocity and deal extra critical damage to marked targets. This increases your damage by a whopping 100% against any given enemy, as long as they are marked with the All at Once trait. With the final shape, we also got the exotic catalyst, String Theory, which grants an additional 10% increase in damage against marked targets, and a 25% chance to refund ammo every shot, effectively increasing our magazine size by 25%. Now we've already touched on a few artifact mods, but let's dive into the rest of them. As we've already mentioned, we want Galvanic Armor for the 30% increase in damage resist while amplified. We also want Radiant Orbs for the Radiant buff on orb pickup, Shield Crush for an additional 25% boost to our grenade damage and recharge rate while amplified or radiant, Transference for a 10% increase to melee and grenade damage while transcendent, and Threaded Blast to increase the size and damage of our strand tangles when destroyed by a strand weapon. While not absolutely mandatory, I recommend running Unstoppable Sidearm and Overload Hand Cannon. And while we're on the subject, I strongly recommend running the Crota's End Hand Cannon, Word of Crota, with Demolitionist for ease of use and overload stuns. For the heavy weapon, it's a bit more situational. However, I really like using the new Strand Adept Scintillation linear fusion rifle with rewind rounds and bait and switch. It gives us great damage capabilities, one-shots barrier shields while radiant, even at Grandmaster level, and is the same damage type as Final Warning, meaning we can benefit from a strand weapon surge on both weapons. So now we have the ability to stun every champion and charge our Transcendence meter faster than any build I personally have ever used. And all this leads us to our Transcendence form, where we can gain access to the best prismatic grenade ability in the game, Freezing Singularity, which sucks enemies in like a vortex grenade and then freezes, suppresses, and shatters them, giving it the ability to stun both overload champions with Suppress and unstoppable champions with Shatter. All the while, we are gaining increased damage resist from Facet of Protection, increased ability regen and damage from Transference, and full health on any defeat after proccing it with an ability Final Blow, making us virtually unkillable in any level of content, even at Grandmaster difficulty. Now for our armor mods. On our helmet, we want Strand Siphon, Hands-On, and Dynamo for orb generation and super uptime. On our gloves, we want Heavy-Handed for more orbs and Focusing Strike for increased class ability uptime. On our chest, we take some resist mods and Charged Up. On our boots, we want 1 Strand Weapon Surge, Recuperation, and Stacks on Stacks for the 10% Strand Weapon boost, more armor charge per orb picked up, and health on orb pickup as well. And finally, on our class item, we want Reaper, Powerful Attraction, and Outreach for easy orb pickup, more orb generation, and melee ability uptime. Now the gameplay loop is very simple. Start by consuming your arc grenade and use your Phoenix Dive to spawn in both buddies. Use your melees to unravel targets and proc Devour. It's also worth noting that unraveled targets damaged by your arc and solar buddies will charge both light and dark meters, as unravel deals strand damage over time and can constantly be refreshed just by dealing damage to that target. Burst fire with Final Warning to unravel targets, and hit crits on high health targets like champions and subjugators to absolutely supercharge your Darkness Transcendence Transcendence meter and shred the enemies in a matter of seconds. Once Transcendent, pop it and continue to slay out, which will continue to fill our super bar. Once your Transcendence runs out, pop Super. And notice that just 1 to 2 melees with the Song of Flame super will fully charge your Light Transcendence meter, and since we gain Devour on ability kills, we are also proccing Facet of Sacrifice, granting us Darkness Transcendence energy as well. Now in higher end content, I like to use Song of Flame more for the damage resist, so feel free to just use a juiced up Final Warning with 90% damage resist to roam freely and slay out. In lower end content, do whatever you want, you're not going to die. Oftentimes, by the time your super runs out, you already have a full Transcendence meter. However, I recommend consuming your Arc Grenade before you pop Transcendence again, as you cannot consume the Freezing Singularity Prismatic Grenade for Arc Souls. Repeat this and absolutely destroy everything. This build can certainly hold its own in any activity, and as proof of that, I tested it extensively in Grandmaster Nightfalls, raids, master dungeons, and even solo flawless dungeons. And as you can see, time and time again, it ranks among some of the best damage in the fire team. Now to avoid making this video too long, I don't want to put all this gameplay at the end, however you can click the video on screen now to watch my full solo flawless Ghost of the Deep run using this build, or go check out the video linked in the description to watch the full uncut playthroughs of various DPS phases using this build. Thanks for watching, and I hope you have a great day.